His journey begins not with a walk, but with a declaration of purpose. For generations, the faithful have been on a quest, searching for meaning, seeking truth, running the race set before them. The journey is long, but the destination is clear. It leads to the greatest story ever told. It leads to the source. This is Running Toward to Bible. 10. Mary Magdalene. Her life changed in a moment, but her loyalty, that lasted forever. Mary Magdalene, often misunderstood, but defined by her fierce, unwavering devotion to Jesus. She was not just a follower, she was a staunch supporter, helping to sustain his ministry. When the world abandoned him, she stood firm. She was there at the cross, enduring the agony of his final moments. She watched the brutal end, her heart shattered. Yet she never ran. She stayed until the very end. And as soon as the Sabbath passed, she went to the tomb, driven by love to pay him final respect. But the stone was gone. The tomb was empty. Her grief turned to confusion. In her distress, she saw the angels, but all she could focus on was the missing body of her Lord. Then she turned and saw a man. She thought he was the gardener, asking where they had taken him. Then he spoke her name, just one word, Mary, and she knew him. Rabboni, teacher! Her tears of sorrow instantly became tears of ecstatic joy. She was the first. Mary Magdalene, the first to witness the resurrection, the first to proclaim the greatest news ever told. Her loyalty was her reward. 9. Mary, the mother of Jesus. Her life was quiet. Her heart was pure. Then the world's destiny knocked on her door. Mary, a humble virgin in Nazareth, was suddenly confronted by the angel Gabriel. He called her highly favored, but Mary was troubled. How could she, a humble servant, be so blessed? The angel revealed the impossible. She would conceive by the Holy Spirit and bear the Son of God. Despite the immense social risk and fear, Mary's faith shone through. She submitted. Her response is the ultimate act of faith. Behold, I am the servant of the Lord. Let it be done to me according to your word. Carrying this impossible secret, she traveled quickly to the Judean hills to visit her cousin, Elizabeth. There, her calling was affirmed. Elizabeth's baby leaped, recognizing the Messiah in Mary's womb. Mary's heart burst forth in praise, the Magnificat, exalting God's greatness and recognizing her own smallness. She faced the hardship of childbirth in a stable, but in her arms was the fulfillment of the ancient promises. Her faith was tested, not just by miracles, but by the prophet Simeon's words, "A sword will pierce your own soul also." Mary's example is the perfect model of humility and submission. Because she said yes, the world received its Savior. 8. Hannah. She was defined by what she lacked, but her silence held a faith stronger than any scorn. Hannah was the beloved wife, yet she bore no children. Her rival Peninnah constantly taunted her for her barrenness. Even her husband's deep love could not comfort her. Her pain was not physical, it was spiritual and societal. Driven to despair, Hannah left the feast and traveled to the heart of her faith, the house of the Lord in Shiloh. There, she poured out her soul, not just for a child, but for the anguish of her barrenness to end. She prayed with such intensity that her lips moved, but no sound was heard. Her prayer was a desperate vow. The priest Eli misunderstood, thinking her drunk, but Hannah insisted, "I am a woman of sorrowful spirit." Eli blessed her, and Hannah's face was changed. She had poured out her grief and left her burden at the altar. God answered her persistent prayer. She gave birth to Samuel, meaning heard of God. True faith keeps its promise. She brought Samuel back to the temple, dedicating him to God's service. Hannah's perseverance in prayer gave Israel one of its greatest prophets. Her vow remains a testament to the power of a dedicated heart. 7. Deborah. In a time of chaos, a woman stepped forward. She didn't seek power, but she answered the call. Israel was under brutal oppression by the Canaanite king Jabin, paralyzed by fear and hopelessness. Amidst the darkness, Deborah, a prophetess and judge, provided the only light, wisdom guided by God. She summoned Barak, the military leader, and delivered God's command: raise an army and attack. But Barak, fearful of the Canaanite army, placed a condition. He would only go if she went with him. Without hesitation, Deborah agreed, accepting the burden. She replied, "I will surely go with you." This was her act of ultimate faith. She risked her safety to bolster the army's courage, leading them into battle. At Mount Tabor, she gave the signal. The battle was joined, trusting not in human strength, but in God's promise. God intervened. A sudden storm swelled the Kishon River, turning the enemy's iron chariots into useless, muddy traps. Sisera, the mighty general, was forced to flee on foot, his pride and power utterly broken. True to Deborah's word, the victory was sealed by a woman's hand, Jael, in a stunning, final act of courage. Deborah's leadership brought 40 years of peace. Her life reminds us that true courage is always rooted in prophetic faith. 6. Rahab. Her home was a place of ill repute, but her heart, it became a sanctuary for God's promise. Rahab lived in Jericho, a city fortified by massive walls, a symbol of resistance against God's people. 2 Israelite spies slipped into the city, seeking refuge. They risked death. She risked everything. She knew who they were and who their God was. In a swift act of faith, she hid them beneath stalks of flax on her roof. Moments later, the king's guards arrived, demanding the spies. Her truth was measured, her protection absolute. She told them the men had left, urging them to pursue quickly. She prioritized God's mission over the king's law. The guards were fooled. Rahab's quick action had bought the spies and herself precious time. Up on the roof, she confessed her faith. "I know that the Lord has given you this land." She extracted their promise. Her family would be spared. The sign of their covenant was the scarlet cord tied to her window. Under the cover of night, Rahab lowered the spies down the wall. Her risky act was complete. When the conquest came, the scarlet cord became their shield. Her faith saved her entire household. Rahab the Canaanite was judged not by her past, but by her courageous faith, earning her a place in the lineage of Christ. 5. Rebecca. Her future was a mystery. Her groom was a stranger. But her faith, that made the journey possible. Abraham sent his most trusted servant on a singular mission: find a godly wife for his son Isaac. The servant prayed for a sign, a miraculous moment where the right woman would reveal herself through an act of extraordinary kindness. Then came Rebecca, beautiful, capable, and ready to serve. She didn't just offer the servant a drink, she ran repeatedly to draw water for all 10 of his thirsty camels. The servant knew. He presented her with Abraham's gold, realizing God had led him directly to the right family. Rebecca rushed home, bringing the dazzling news and the certainty that this meeting was ordained by God. Her family wished to delay, but the servant urged them, "Do not hinder me, since the Lord has prospered my way." The ultimate choice was hers. They asked simply, "Will you go with this man?" Her answer was instant and profound. With unwavering faith in God's providence, she said, "I will go." She chose the promise over the familiar. After months of travel, her destination and her future came into view. Isaac, meditating in the fields. She covered herself and was led to her destiny. Rebecca trusted the unseen and was blessed with the love of her life. 4. Eva. She was the first to fall. But in that crushing darkness, she was also the first to believe the impossible promise. Eve, the first woman, walked in perfect harmony with God, living in the breathtaking perfection of Eden. But a choice was presented. The serpent introduced doubt, twisting God's clear, simple command. The temptation was overwhelming. In a moment of fateful disbelief, Eve reached out and took the forbidden fruit. The consequence was immediate: broken trust, shame, and the fall of humanity into sin. Confronted by God, they received the judgment for their disobedience, marking the end of paradise. But amidst the curse, God gave the first prophecy. The seed of the woman would crush the head of the serpent. Clothed in animal skins, the first sacrifice, they were banished from Eden and into the harsh world. When her first son was born, her faith was evident. She declared, "I have acquired a man from the Lord." Her hope was tragically dashed as sin repeated itself, leading to the murder of her son, Abel. Yet, her faith endured the devastating loss. She conceived Seth, believing God had appointed him as a replacement. Eve's legacy is monumental. She was the first to experience loss, but her enduring faith secured the lineage through which our ultimate Redeemer would come. 3. Esther. The crown is beautiful but symbolizes a heavy burden and separation from her people. The opulence highlights her isolation. She is a jewel in a golden cage, but a sinister threat emerged. The wicked minister Haman secured a decree to annihilate every Jew in the empire. Esther's cousin Mordecai sent a plea: "You have been placed here for such a time as this." To approach the king uninvited meant death. Her fear was rational. Her silence meant her own people's doom. She made the choice of integrity. She declared, "If I perish, I perish." After 3 days of fasting, she walked the longest distance of her life toward the king's judgment. God moved the king's heart. He extended the golden scepter, saving her life and granting her an audience. Esther's plan was strategic. She did not reveal the plot at once, but invited them to a second, private feast. At the second feast, she stood up and bravely spoke the truth, accusing Haman of his evil plan against her people. Justice was swift. Haman was executed, and the decree of death was replaced by a decree of defense. Esther's courage, rooted in her faith, secured the survival of her people. She is the epitome of speaking truth to power. 2. Ruth. She was an outsider, a widow, and a foreigner, but her loyalty forged the most sacred bond in history. After losing her husband, Ruth, the Moabite, faced the difficult choice: return home or stay with her bitter mother-in-law, Naomi. Naomi urged her to leave, but Ruth made the greatest declaration of loyalty. It was more than family loyalty. It was a conversion of faith, choosing the God of Israel and a life of sacrifice. They arrived in Bethlehem as impoverished outsiders, dependent entirely on God's mercy and Ruth's determination. Ruth immediately went to work, gleaning in the fields to ensure her mother-in-law had food. Her kindness and fierce work ethic did not go unnoticed. Boaz, a wealthy relative, was drawn to her faithfulness. He protected her, ensured she had plenty, and treated her with dignity, the reward for her loyalty. Naomi recognized God's hand and devised a plan, guiding Ruth toward the path of full redemption. Ruth took a risk. Dressed in her finest, she made a vulnerable appeal for protection and marriage on the threshing floor. The ultimate reward? Boaz redeemed her, bought back the land, and married Ruth, fully integrating the foreigner. Ruth's faith made her an ancestor of King David, and ultimately of Jesus Christ. Her loyalty found its lasting reward. 1. Sarah. Her life was defined by an impossible silence. But her final answer proved that nothing is too hard for the Lord. Sarah was the beautiful wife of Abraham. Her destiny was to be the mother of nations, but her reality was barrenness. Decade after decade, they clung to God's promise. Their offspring would be as numerous as the stars. Waiting is hard. After decades of delay, Sarah's human faith began to crumble under the weight of time. She took matters into her own hands, attempting to help God fulfill the promise through her servant, Hagar. But God's plan cannot be hurried. 3 divine visitors arrived, not to bless, but to reiterate the promise. When she heard the news, she would have a son next year, she laughed. a laugh of pure incredulous. The gentle rebuke came. Is anything too hard for the Lord? A simple question that dismantles all human logic. In that moment she shifted. By faith she received the strength to conceive, believing the one who had promised. The impossible happened. The promise took root, and Sarah experienced the miracle of new life in her old age. She held her son Isaac, whose name means laughter. Laughter of joy, finally replacing the laughter of disbelief. Sarah's faith teaches us that God's timeline is perfect. When he promises, age, time, and circumstance do not matter. The stories of these women of faith are not ancient history. They are powerful examples for the race we run today. They teach us that faith is not a passive belief. It is an active choice. It is the courage to keep running when the path is toughest. What impossible challenge are you running toward? Share your thoughts and tell us which story inspired you the most in the comments below. Don't let this journey stop here. If you are committed to running toward the Bible, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Join us next time as we continue our journey.